There seems to be a mistake, sir. We need you to relocate to accommodate our VIP customer, Jessica. The flight attendant said, her tone condescending despite the polite words. This seat is reserved for just our platinum members. You don't belong and can't sit here. Behind her stood Karen Wickfield, a beautifully dressed white lady, pressing her fancy watch nervously. Her eyes darted between Marcus, the black guy on the seat he occupied, Site 2A, which she plainly regarded her rightful position. I usually sit there. It's basically my seat, she mumbled simply, loud enough for neighboring passengers to hear. Marcus gazed up, confused, crossing his face. He had done everything properly. Booked early, paid in full, arrived on when he was a platinum member, yet nonetheless his presence in the seat was being portrayed as an issue that needed solution. Marcus calmly went for his wallet and retrieved his platinum member card. I am a platinum member, he answered equally, and this is my allocated seat. The flight attendant grin constricted. A glimmer of astonishment crossed her smile, soon replaced by resolve. I understand, sir, but this specific seat is generally allocated for a better customer, pointing to Karen Whitfield. Our regular platinum member, Marcus, didn't fly with us much, but the inference was obvious regardless of his standing. Sitting in that seat, passengers began to discover phones steadily appeared. The whispers started. What the flight crew didn't realize was that this simple act of discrimination would transform everything, not just for them, in the coming hours. However, for the whole airline, this is the greatest narrative since the person they underestimated had their destiny in his hands. As an example, have you ever experienced unjust treatment when karma shows up with a first-class ticket of its own? Because of your appearance, share your experiences in the comments section below. And if you oppose, click the subscribe button now and enter in the words, prejudice and injustice being served. As you can see in the comment area, Justice, Marcus wasn't just any traveler at 42. He was the creator and chief executive officer of the $2.8 billion AI startup Right Tech Solutions. His software, which specialized in customer service technology, assisted businesses in recognizing and getting rid of prejudice in their consumer contacts, which is paradoxical given what was about to happen. But Marcus's journey started in South Chicago, long before he became successful. When Marcus was 11 years old, he used a used computer to teach himself to code, while other children played video games he created. Their development of basic programs that subsequently become sophisticated algorithms. His journey wasn't simple. When Marcus was 16, his father was killed in standing at his father's grave during an attack that rocked his community. In order to define his existence and force others to view one another as fellow humans, young Marcus made a pledge. Drove him to work tirelessly for 20 years, beginning his business in a small flat. Marcus does various jobs to pay his rent sooner, and codes for 18 hours every day. Marcus was seen on the airport surveillance cameras that day, gently assisting an elderly woman who was having trouble with her bags. Holding doors open for strangers, he helped her locate her gate and thanked everyone, service employee by name, and left a big gratuity at the airport cafeteria. But because he was being observed, but because Marcus Richardson was a modest person. Notwithstanding his authority and accomplishment, Marcus was on the road to give the keynote speech at the Global Ethics and Technology Conference. As he became comfortable with he picked a first-class seat since it provided more legroom, which allowed him to work during the journey. To travel by air with Skylux Airlines, which was the pinnacle of luxury air travel. First-class tickets were more expensive than some people's monthly rent, but Platinum MERS had access to warm towels, champagne service, and fully bed reclining chairs. Yet behind this, Skylux was frantically attempting to update its reservation systems despite their pristine facade. Out of date, their customer service ratings had declined, and they were actively seeking a collaboration with a significant tech. This transaction was necessary for the corporation to transform its operations. Sadly, the Skylux crew was unaware that occupying seat 2A was really Jessica, a flight attendant, the CEO of the firm they thought would save them. Miller took great satisfaction in being familiar with the tastes of frequent first-class passengers over her 8 years with Skylux. She always ensured that Karen Wickfield had her desired seat, 2A among the passengers. One that is now inhabited by Marcus. Jessica had expenses to cover and was aware that her monthly mortgage was made possible by your tips, sir. She is a platinum member. Who always occupies this specific seat? Jessica inquired, bending down to speak to Marcus. Would you mind switching seats in the class? Her tone was kind, yet conveyed, and Marcus searched for an undertone of expectation that the only appropriate reaction was acquiescence. He grabbed for his boarding card. Briefly bewildered and displayed, he politely said, I'm sorry, but this is my assigned seat, to Jessica. Additionally, Platinum member Karen Whitfield was visible in the aisle with no disguise. Displeasure. Other travelers could plainly hear her say, I sit there on this road all the time. It's almost like my seat. Things were rapidly getting unpleasant for a number of individuals. Jessica moved her weight from one foot to the other as she watched the exchange. Looking anxiously between Marcus and Karen, sir, you may be. Jessica seemed more at ease in a different region, making her suggestion obvious. When she offered him another first-class seat, Marcus stayed calm and said, No. I've chosen this seat especially for the legroom since I need to work during the day, he said firmly. Thank you, flight. Jessica grinned more broadly, gave a brief nod, and moved in the direction of the front of the cabin, where she periodically looked back at Marcus. And what transpired next was, Karen went forward to be photographed by a passenger, across the aisle. She tucked a package in what seemed to be an overhead container, slid a bundle of notes discreetly into Jessica's pocket. Thank you for your assistance with, Karen said in a whisper loud enough for the persons in the vicinity to witness the blush on Jessica's face as he took the money. Simple seating conflict turned into a much more sinister inducement to treat a traveler unfairly because of their looks in the first-class cabin had moved. Trevor, the cabin manager, came over to Marcus's seat with the certain gait of someone used to having his authority accepted without question, his tight stance and face set in what he probably thought was a professional manner. Gentlemen, we need you to relocate. Trevor declared loudly enough for other passengers to hear him in order to make room for our VIP passenger. Evidently, this wasn't a request, but a directive. Marcus glanced up from his tablet once again, his face composed but his gaze displaying a tired familiarity with such interactions. I've displayed my boarding pass. Platinum status. Marcus had an even response, saying, This is my signed seat. Trevor. A muscle close to his jaw jerked as his face contracted and he leaned slightly forward. Speech becoming patronizing, causing a number of individuals in the vicinity to shift uneasily in their seats. You might not understand how this airline operates, Trevor remarked, by stressing every phrase as though addressing a young audience. We cater to deserving clients who had certain tastes. The altercation had attracted the interest of almost all of the first-class passengers were businesswomen on the other side of the aisle, openly recorded the growing exchange while subtly tilting his phone toward it. Circumstances. Millions of people would watch these films in a few of hours. Karen was impatient and stood in the aisle on line, clutching her beautiful bags to her chest. She checked her watch theatrically, became more dramatic, and then exaggeratedly sighed. That reverberated around the cabin. I have a crucial meeting immediately upon landing. I need my normal seat and this is beyond expectations, she declared to no one in particular. Stupid, the other passengers' facial expressions conveyed the truth about you. According to one of them, Trevor should leave the seat because he doesn't appear to be able to afford it. Encouraged by Karen's performance, he leaned in closer to Marcus and said softly. His comments were hardly heard in the strained silence of the cabin, but they were nonetheless understood by others in the vicinity. Sir, this is the simple option, or we can make it challenging for you. The danger remained. Passengers held their breath as the moment dragged on for seconds. Many individuals may have given in to the pressure of public confrontation at this point due to Marcus's response. Threat the intention of preventing more escalation, but Marcus Richardson wasn't. Most of the time he stared Trevor in the eyes and remained composed. He firmly said, This is my seat. In 6 straightforward words that were given without Trevor's cheeks flushed crimson. But it was definitely anger, or hostility. His plans weren't working out, so he straightened and fixed his uniform tie. He proceeded quickly toward the entrance of the cottage he selected without saying anything else, raising the service phone with his back to the passengers, yet his furious motions were apparent to everyone in line. Suddenly, a flight that ought to have been ordinary was about to turn into something that none of the participants would ever ignore the tension that was evident in the cabin as Trevor yelled quickly into. The service phone users looked at each other, and some of them were typing frantically on there. Marcus had returned to the phones of those observing with undisguised curiosity. Analyzing his presentation, his composed demeanor revealed nothing. 5 minutes before the cockpit door opened, he must have been thinking. Opening Captain James Reynolds' aged face appeared in a polished mask as he followed Trevor down the aisle, with Jessica following in their wake. The captain was clearly unhappy with the scenario that was becoming worse, and his appearance told everyone that this had escalated from a minor sitting conflict to an official intervention, which Captain Reynolds put an end to. His words echoed above the sitting passenger next to Marcus's seat, pretended to be someone who was accustomed to being followed without question. "Sir, I realize that something is going on," the captain started, off in a calm but forceful tone. "Marcus, my team has the power to assign seats based on demand to ensure everyone's comfort and convenience," observed the 3 airline workers standing above him. The power dynamic wasn't subtle. There were 3 standing and 1 seated. "However, Captain," Marcus maintained his poise at all times, said in a strong voice, "I have platinum and a confirmed seat assignment. Status: given the legroom I require to work during the journey, I have chosen this particular seat. There is no rule that demands that I give up the seat I was given to a traveler who just wants." What could only be called a sneer formed on Trevor's lips, phrase of a person who thought they had all the cards. "Sir, if you feel recalcitrant," Trevor interrupted, "we'll have to take you out of the threat struck like a physical blow, and Marcus's eyebrows lifted a little. The first indication of sincere astonishment he's shown during the altercation. "Are you threatening to? I won't give up the seat I paid for, so please remove me," he said in a voice. The question, with its implausible implications, lingered in the air, conveying skepticism, to disregard any grounds that could exist for a passenger's removal, who was just sitting in his designated seat, before the captain could answer. Karen's tone broke the tension as she said, "This is absurd." Her voice rose, sharply. "I will miss our connection. In all the years I've known, I have never experienced such poor treatment." The irony of her grievance was not missed on the other travelers, as several of them, they exchanged shocked glances, maybe with Captain Reynolds realizing that things were getting out of control, was expected to take a more commanding position. "This is your last warning. Move to a different seat or we'll call," sternly said. Marcus reached cautiously into his jacket pocket and took out his phone with security at this very time. With slow motions, he launched his camera app and started filming. "I'd want to clarify what's happening here," Marcus remarked coolly while his phone recorded. "I am being threatened with getting kicked off this aircraft because I refuse to give up." When another traveler requested my seat, Trevor's expression twisted. Angry, he grabbed Marcus's phone, losing all control. He broke his hand dangerously toward the end of the tape, which is not allowed. Pulling his phone back just out of reach, Marcus grabbed his property. Actually, unless it interferes with crew duties, recording aboard an airplane is not prohibited by federal law. For my own security, I'm only recording this exchange so that the legal information is captured. What would you have done if you had taken Trevor by surprise? He pulled his hand away, but his face grew even more serious. If you were Marcus, would you move from the seat or maintain your position? To enjoy more of these, please share your thoughts in the comments section and remember to click the subscribe button. The heavy footsteps of 2 airport security officers were the next sound to reverberate through the cabin. Officers getting on the aircraft. Their presence signaled a no returning to the aisle. The security guards proceeded with their usual precision. Tracing Trevor's hand gesture straight to Marcus's seat, the cabin had become utterly quiet. Even the background noise of the airplane appeared to have diminished as everyone's focus. Marcus maintained his composure and erect posture throughout the altercation. His phone kept filming even after the humiliation he had endured. From where he had placed it on his lap, "Sir," the first security officer began, "We've been notified there's an issue necessitating your evacuation from the airplane." Marcus nodded once, acknowledging the officer's presence while retaining his dignity. "I'd want to learn the precise airline policy." "I'm breaching," demanded, his voice clear and measured. "I'm seated in my allotted seat with a valid boarding permit and platinum status." The security officials swapped uneasy stares. It was becoming increasingly evident they had been summoned to remove a passenger who had broken no regulations. Sir, you need to grab your items and come with us, the second officer remarked, skirting the topic totally. Marcus glanced squarely at Trevor. Jessica and Captain Reynolds were a few steps away. Am I being kicked out for not? Marcus immediately requested that I relinquish my properly allotted seat to another traveler. His query, which pierced through the facade that you're being sent out for disturbing the captain, as he said the phrase, which sounded hollow. A whisper swept through the cottage, and an old man in the second row confirmed with a shake of his head. And Marcus began as a young woman at the rear of the first class quietly and dignifiedly brushed away her tears. Closing his tablet case and placing his presentation notes in his briefcase, he gathered his things and got up. Karen, who had been observing the whole incident, gradually made no effort to. A self-satisfied grin tugged at the corners of her mouth as she observed Marcus being led away from his seat. Presently, she thought, serves him well. He was obviously doesn't belong, a voice said from someplace in the cabin. But he contacted another traveler and did nothing wrong. All of this is being recorded for a third announcement. But Marcus, in spite of the remarks, he walked with his head held high, his back straight, and his looks forward to the stance of a guy who has experienced injustice and is aware of how to keep his face in the line as he went beyond the line where Trevor was standing. During the supervision of the removal, an incident occurred that would later become a crucial component of proof. Karen, believing she was invisible, slid another folded money inside Trevor's pocket. I appreciate you taking care of it, she said, in a whisper. There should be guidelines for first class, as it should be loud enough for many individuals to record their phones. She spoke something that hovered in the air like a noxious cloud, and Marcus, upon exiting the aircraft under security guard supervision, he took out his phone once more, moving his fingers swiftly over the screen when he was writing a text message to his wife, Elise. I was taken off the plane, but they humiliated the incorrect person, when most people would be. After such an encounter, Marcus displayed the signs of being flustered, ashamed, or angry. The poise of someone who had been through these situations before. Sarah, I need you to get the legal team together right away, Marcus said into his phone. His tone was forceful yet low. I was just taken off a Skylux airplane in what seems to be a classic instance of unfair treatment by the security guards who watched him leave the aircraft, their initial assurance evaporating into discomfort. Recognition of an officer's countenance as he studied the incident report on his tablet, becoming more and more disturbed as he perused the information. Sir, after some hesitation, the officer said, I think there might have been the report shows that you were being disruptive, but some of the witness comments don't confirm that. Marcus put his phone down for a brief minute while maintaining a steady focus while speaking. There was, in fact, a mistake, the officer said, but not on when I was requested to relocate to make room for someone else. I was in my designated seat with a valid boarding pass. When I refused to comply with the passenger's request, the officer shifted and forcibly removed me. Uncomfortably, he glanced at his buddy, who was already retreating from the circumstance. They both knew utilized to impose a rule that was unrelated to safety or security. We regret any difficulty caused, sir. The officer provided weekly routine before following his colleague in a quick retreat. Marcus got right back to recording the event, recording a comprehensive voice memo that details every conversation and word uttered into his phone, every nuance of body language he had noticed. With hesitation, a young woman approached, holding her phone in one hand and her carry-on bag in the other. I instantly recognized her. She had been sitting across the aisle from him in first class. Excuse me, sir, she said. I followed you off the plane in an outraged tone on his behalf. Since I couldn't simply sit there and watch what was occurring, I took a video, from the time the flight attendant initially came up to you until they had you off the aircraft. She held. Marcus saw the video on her phone, which was clear and unhindered, not just his dismissal but also the feeling of guilt when Karen embezzled funds. Trevor could see that this was blatant bigotry as the woman's voice shook. You should soften Marcus's look a little with emotion he said thank you, with sincere appreciation, for the first time since the nightmare started. Woman promised to transmit the contact information they shared, which may be extremely beneficial, giving him the entire uncut film right away and offering to testify if necessary, something she didn't. What none of them realized was that millions of people would soon watch her video. Meanwhile, a very different situation was developing back on the plane. Karen, with smug pleasure, Whitfield had taken a seat comfortably in Marcus's chair. Jessica gave me a free glass of champagne, which I'm so grateful for. Miss Whitfield. Jessica apologized for the inconvenience, however we would want to. Make sure your remaining flight in the galley is flawless with no passengers. Jessica and Trevor exchanged sly glances as Trevor surreptitiously tallied the folded money Karen had stole $200 from him, the sum they had agreed to pay to degrade a man whose sole transgression was sitting down on a chair he had really bought. Trevor whispered, putting the cash in his wallet. Some travelers know how to display, nevertheless. They were both unaware that this windfall would eventually cost them a great deal, greater than they could have ever imagined. All of a sudden, a call arrived to one of the airline administrators called the crew for an urgent meeting, telling them that they had simply made a serious error that would have cost them their jobs, and all three were terrified. The mood had changed as they stared at one another, attempting to comprehend what was going on. They were obviously out of control now. Who was the man they threw from the VIP seat and pulled from Skylux's sleek glass-walled office's upper-floor plane? Skylux's CEO, Richard Williams, was examining the quarterly predictions that we would have a major problem when his phone rang, and the public relations department called him internally, sir. As the incident progressed, the PR director's voice had a clear hint of worry. A video is going viral showing one of our customers getting pulled from a flight this morning. Williams sighed, originally disdainful passengers being expelled for disruptive conduct every day. Janet Hughes. The standard response, sir. But note that this is not the PR. The passenger, a black male in the first place, was not disruptive, according to the director. Class, who resisted giving up his designated seat to a white woman. The footage depicts our employees taking money from the blood seeped from Williams's face both before and after he removed the lady, sent me the video after considering the ramifications, and Williams watched the footage on his monitor. His face changed from worry to horror at the obvious discrimination and the money. The man's dignified poise as he was taken out was a PR stunt. Disaster, playing out in real time. Who is he? Williams asked. Have we? There was a pause after identifying the passenger before the PR director said, Yes, sir. In accordance with. The hush that ensued was deafening. The manifest name is Marcus Richardson. Did you mention that? When Williams finally said, Yes, sir. Does that name? His voice was hardly audible above a whisper. Mean something to you? Williams fell back in his seat and gazed at the ceiling. Right Tech Solutions founder and CEO is Marcus Richardson. We have been pursuing a partnership worth $50 million with the same company. Firm that has been discreetly purchasing our shares in a private airport miles away for the past 2 years. Lounge. Marcus sat in the middle of a team that was quickly coming together, and his Elise Thompson had come within 20 minutes of his text, bringing with her their chief legal counsel and head of corporate communications. Computers were open, phones were humming, and the atmosphere crackled with focused enthusiasm. The video, as the communications director reported that it had already reached 2 million views, turning her screen to display the fast-rising statistics. Major news outlets are scooping it up now. Elise and Marcus shared a profound gaze, one that spoke of years of shared experiences and mutual understanding. They don't realize that we were already analyzing their firm. Elise's tone conveyed the bitter irony of the situation, which I suppose they just gave us, as she spoke about the partnership's culture, their true selves, without noticing the observers. The social media team was in full crisis mode at Skylux headquarters. Screens showed the quickly deteriorating state of #Skylux discrimination. The video was trending nationwide, with over 5 million views, and celebrities were starting to spread the word among their millions of fans, and Williams was now encircled by his executive staff. Their expressions are grim as they evaluate the damage, but his assistant intervened. Sir, taking the phone, I'll put Marcus Richardson's office on hold so you can ask to talk to him. The room immediately became quiet, and Williams inhaled deeply before agreeing to the call Mr. Richardson on the speakerphone. He started off by speaking in a strained forced, "I would like to extend our sincere apologies for the unacceptable incident." This morning, the CFO was interrupted by a waiter who had frantically going through files. Marcus Richardson, the technician. Marcus's voice came through the speaker calmly, and CEO Williams gave a gloomy nod. "Hello, Mr. Williams. I value your openness to communication. As you may know, my business directly owns around 25% of Skylux. The management traded a majority stake in the airline with our strategic partners." Frantic looks, as the gravity of the situation finally dawned on them. "Want to call an urgent shareholder meeting right away." Marcus's tone didn't allow for discussion. Today's events have given rise to grave worries regarding Skylux's an emergency board meeting, and the company's dedication to treating all passengers ethically had been called with extraordinary urgency, and board members had thrown everything off to go to some golf-related events. Clothes that others had obviously hurried from family gatherings. The tension in the room felt oppressive while they awaited the man who now held there. When Marcus Richardson eventually entered, the impact was instantaneous, and fate was in his hands, and every head turned even though the electric conversation stopped in the middle of a sentence. Despite everything that had happened to him that day, Marcus exuded the calm assurance of a man who knew exactly who when. Taken off, he was wearing the same suit that he had been wearing, demonstrating his worth. A subdued yet potent reminder of the day's events from the aircraft, walked with two members of his executive team, Elise Thompson, their legal counsel, and presence would subsequently prove essential to the impending transition. When Marcus sat down, Williams lowered the lights with a remote control and turned on the enormous screen in front of the room before the video started. The ramifications of each event were heartbreaking and crystal evident. Recorded Trevor's disdain at the first encounter, the captain's inadequate explanations, and the most incriminating of all, the money exchanged previously. And when Marcus was taken out and the video concluded, the room was quiet for the whole 30 seconds. Marcus Williams cleared his throat, and many board members were unable to keep eye contact. Face ashen as he turned to speak directly to Marcus. "Mr. Richardson, we would want to convey our sincere regrets for the unacceptable treatment you received today. This behavior does not befit the ideals of Skylux Airlines, and I'm not interested in saying sorry." Marcus cut him off, calmly yet resolutely, and responded bluntly, sent a noticeable ripple through the room, causing the board members to fidget uneasily in their leather chairs. They became acutely aware that normal business damage management wouldn't be enough because you're your biggest person. Shareholder Marcus went on. "I have one request and one choice to make first. The employee in question gets fired right away once I cancel the proposed agreement between this airline and my IT business." Williams looked anxiously at the board members. "Although we can see your displeasure," before answering Mr. Richardson, "maybe we may think about suspensions instead, as some of these workers have worked for the firm and our union for a long time." Placing his palms firmly on the table, Marcus said, "This isn't negotiable. Table, else I'll withdraw my investment in the $50 million deal we were thinking about." The ramifications loomed large in the air at 25%. If their shares were abruptly released onto the market, the $50 million modernization contract would be lost, which would be disastrous. As if on cue in the boardroom, it would put them years behind their rivals. Doors sprang open, and a young financial analyst hurried in, obviously fleeing from another. He threw a tablet at Williams, disregarding all boardroom protocol. "Since the situation has already affected our stock, etiquette in his eagerness, sir, hurriedly, he declared, price is down 12% and falling. Market gurus are forecasting a Williams looked at a potential 30% decline by close if we don't move decisively." Between Marcus and the tablet, the truth of his circumstances it became painfully obvious that this was about more than just one event. It was about without Marcus, the airline's ability to survive would be compromised because everything, should he go, other investors will also withdraw their holdings, rendering the very person they invested in bankrupt. 3 stories below them. Boardroom had been taken off the aircraft and now had the airline's destiny in his hands. Without any luxuries, Trevor, Jessica, and Captain were in a sterile meeting room. Reynolds sat there in awkward quiet. The rising whispers had called them without warning. They had cause for concern throughout the organization, and the HR director arrived right away. At 4:30 p.m., in the company's legal counsel and 2 security guards, policemen who stood quietly outside the entrance. The existence of security served as a warning flag for something far more serious than performance assessments or even disciplinary hearings. To be honest, the HR director started putting 3 specific files on. The table indicates that your employment with Skylux Airlines has been terminated with effect. Jessica's palm shot to her mouth as soon as the sentence hit her, smothering a gasp in Trevor's face. Captain Reynolds only closed his eyes, his aged visage suddenly seeming decades old, and he twisted indignantly. We apologized to Trevor, who was the first to regain his voice, with every word that we were only following protocol since the passenger was acting obstinate, and the HR director interrupted the boarding procedure by opening her mouth. But her countenance remained neutral, turned the laptop in their direction, and the now viral video started playing. Jessica's unease was well conveyed by the captain's disdain, which demonstrated his lack of accountability. Apparent for all to see, but it was what happened next that drained the color from Trevor's face. The tape clearly showed Karen's putting money into his pocket, her statements about preserving standards heard, despite her tried to talk, quietly, was taking money from the HR director's tone made it apparent when she requested the passenger to discriminate against another passenger. Jessica broke down in tears, since there was no appropriate response. We made a horrible mistake, she acknowledged, and I could tell by the whisper in her voice. Captain Reynolds, even though it was wrong at the time, I did nothing to stop it. A man who had successfully negotiated actual storms in his professional life didn't appear to be able to handle this. I was simply relying on my weekly cruise evaluation that he provided. But I didn't directly observe how you all failed in your duties today. The HR director, in the opening confrontation, said clearly that the passenger should respect fundamental human decency as well as the corporation. Marcus Richardson, the chief executive officer of Right Tech Solutions and our biggest. The revelation struck each stockholder like a second blow, and Jessica started weeping. Suddenly Trevor's face, which had been red with rage, now seemed exhausted. You will be led to get your personal stuff once you are fully colored. The HR director then went on to leave, saying that your last salary will comprise 2-week severance, which is quite kind considering the situation since they were LED from in the room. The 3 former workers felt the same shame Marcus had earlier that day. The symmetry was flawless, as they were taken away as others observed. Incident occurring at the Skylock headquarters main auditorium. This CEO made a historic statement in front of hundreds of workers, stood on stage today with Marcus Richardson and his group at his sides. Skylux Williams started by saying that airlines had fundamentally failed one of our passengers. He said in a quiet place that this failure wasn't a singular occurrence, but rather a sign of underlying problems that need to be addressed right away. And thoroughly he indicated to Marcus, who came up and gave each Skylux employee an explanation of the future before they can resume operations. Airlines will have thorough training on prejudice. Williams carried on with this WR Tech Solutions created training program will become an ongoing component of our onboarding and ongoing education conversations that circulate across the gathering. When employees grasped the importance of what was being disclosed, Marcus addressed the issue of a company-wide training program that would disrupt operations and cost millions of dollars. Gathered workers face to face, his words bearing the weight of his professional authority and life experience. He clarified that this goes beyond simply penalizing individuals responsible. It's about changing your whole culture. Occurred today wasn't just bad because I was a shareholder. It would have been wrong if I had been a. The staff member listened silently as a teacher, doctor, or student made their way home. While several nod in agreement, others gaze down in mutual shame at what had being carried out under their companies. Name, the CEO declared tomorrow. When the meeting comes to a close, Skew Airlines will implement a grounding the whole organization for required training on every aircraft, every route. For 48 hours, service will be interrupted while all of our employees take part in. Gasps could be heard throughout the auditorium during the program's first phase in an industry. If hundreds were lost due to minutes of delay, A 48-hour stoppage was unprecedented. The airline would have to pay millions of dollars, but the message it conveyed about Marcus observed their dedication to change from the stage, and it was invaluable. Employee reactions to this news varied. Some displayed opposition while others, relief. But the majority showed an increasing understanding that this significant event represented a change in their companies. In the weeks following the tragedy, Skylux Airlines' identity was subject to the most extensive renovation in the conference room's 30-year history. Were turned into training facilities, and flight schedules were changed to guarantee that all workers were free of luggage. Although they took part in the required program, the CEO's handlers' training wasn't the norm. Employees had been accustomed to disregarding the corporate checklist exercise, which made it immersive and difficult, and occasionally awkward staff members faced their own prejudices. Via complex simulation exercises created by the WRTX team of Marcus, a behavioral psychologist and AI specialist, made it a point to attending several of these workshops in person while standing in front of skeptics and occasionally defensive. He informed his staff that this is their chance to contribute to the solution. Voice bearing the burden of my own experience. What occurred to me occurs to others who don't have my resources or platform, which we are starting to change daily today. For some, his presence weighs transformational, giving a human face to what his management may have otherwise written off as a public relations disaster. Despite his treatment, his desire to participate showed that he was more interested in real change than retaliation. Outside of Sky's corporate cocoon, the repercussions persisted throughout in the digital age. Chef Jessica and Captain Reynolds learned, "You are held accountable everywhere you go," and their names and faces had come to represent discrimination in and reputation as currency in this industry. Trevor sat in his apartment, surrounded by emails of rejection from other airlines. Although prior experiences noted, we have chosen to look for other candidates at this time because the courteous corporate language was unable to conceal the truth. Similar rejections were experienced by Jessica, who wanted to hire the man from that viral video. Each one helped her better grasp how one choice could change the course of a career cultivated over 8 years during a single interview that at first glance appeared encouraging. The hiring managers when it became clear that you were the flight attendant who was subjected to discrimination. Your expression changed. You mean that the interview concluded soon after Captain Reynolds with 30 years of aviation expertise. He was unable to land even entry-level jobs in his illustrious career in the sector, to those few moments of bad judgment when he had failed to stand up for what was right. Skylock did not spare Karen Whitfield either, had put a lifetime ban into effect, but the repercussions went well beyond her preferred airline while watching news reports about the incident in her living room. Her name and actions were discussed. According to national commentators, she was placed on administrative leave by her employer. Friends had cut off contact with her while an investigation into her behavior was ongoing. They don't want to be linked to the woman who is now known as Airline Karen on social media. For maybe the first time, she was compelled to face the true effects of her entitlement at the same time that Skylux was putting new rules and comprehensive policy changes into effect. 0 tolerance for discrimination. Improved procedures for resolving disputes about seating and protection. The employee handbook was revised to accommodate staff members who reported misconduct. Expressly declare that taking gifts or money from travelers in return for, when passengers realized that preferential treatment was grounds for immediate termination, they started to notice disparities were almost immediately noted in the short interviews recorded at gates and baggage. According to reports, there was a change in the perception that the flight attendant was paying more attention to everyone. It always seemed like there was an invisible hierarchy to frequent flyers before. Based on your appearance and the clothes you were wearing, I had a problem with The way they handled the situation was entirely professional. They found a way to share a seat with another passenger, solution that satisfied everyone without diminishing anyone's sense of worth. As Marcus gradually reinstated his investment after quantifiable adjustments were made and independently confirmed. Although it would take a while to recover, auditors Sky's stock started too. The organization completely redesigned its hiring procedures with diversity initiatives that went beyond surface level. The change wasn't accompanied by metrics to address the core problems of inclusion and representation. Perfect or instantaneous real change never exists. Yet every week SKU was turning, becoming the business that its ads had always purported to be. One where everyone really was pampered like a king or queen 6 months after the event that almost brought SKU to ruin. In addition to surviving, the airline was flourishing, with passenger numbers having not only recovered, but employee satisfaction. Ratings rose by 12%, an all-time high when the poisonous culture that had been rotting for years beneath the surface was exposed to the light and was finally getting better. But the most unexpected thing happened on a soggy Tuesday. The morning that Marcus Richardson revealed a brand new project via his foundation, particularly for those who lost their employment as a result of prejudice events. The Second Chance program, the O program, provided thorough training for rehabilitation and a route back. Marcus, being held accountable for your work does not entail being permanently punished. Outlined at the program's press conference that earning your way back is the only way to create a more equitable society. If we do not establish pathways for those who have admitted their errors and taken the necessary steps to Trevor Jessica were among the program's initial participants and Captain Reynolds. None of them had an easy voyage because the program needed them to face their own difficult realities in order to comprehend how their actions affect Marcus as well as numerous others were subjected to similar treatment without being able to defend themselves, including Trevor, who had been the most resistant, experienced the greatest change during group sessions. Talked about growing up in a home where racism was accepted on a casual basis. He never questioned his inherited biases until they cost him everything. I never considered myself to be biased, as he acknowledged in a particularly impactful session. I reasoned that because, since I was among the good people, I didn't use derogatory language or express hatred toward anyone. This experience has taught me how Jessica's journey concentrated on the idea that bias exists even when we are unaware of it in ourselves. Moral courage and the readiness to speak up even if doing so could cost you. I was scared of losing my job if I confronted Trevor or the captain about what was wrong, but now I realize that by remaining silent, I permitted Captain Reynolds, the eldest of perhaps the most difficult journey was that of the three, who believed he had cured his conduct that day raised questions for everyone equitably, trusted the wrong things, since he mirrored my own belief that hierarchy was superior to humanity. Used the program's certificates to spend the remainder of my career putting that right. Trevor and Jessica started applying for entry-level jobs at several airlines with their applications in hand. Added their story now, not as a justification but as background information for the development. The certificates they had received did not negate their prior behavior, but they showed a willingness to adapt that some employers found convincing, and Jessica was the first to get a job at a regional airline as a ground crew member instead of a flight attendant, but the pay was less than, hours were longer, and the work was half of what she had made at Skylux, physically taxing. But she had once considered it a second opportunity. Unfeasible Trevor, who began working in baggage handling at another airline, Captain Reynolds had to take a different route because of his age and experience, would never again fly for a living. But he found meaning in teaching in the Second Chance program, assisting others in understanding. The results of the choices he had made regarding Skylux itself were, passengers had already noticed that the airline was now leading the industry, and this was confirmed by independent auditors. For the first time, customer satisfaction among all demographics was higher for Black, Middle Eastern, and Hispanic travelers. Reported levels of service satisfaction are comparable to or superior to those of passengers who are white. A standard metric, a private meeting at Skylux, revealed that it had never been accomplished in the industry. Marcus reviewed the 6-month report at headquarters while seated opposite CEO Richard Williams. Marcus agreed to close the folder, and your progress report shows genuine change. Williams nodded the document with the most recent metrics that warrant acknowledgement. It hasn't been easy, he acknowledged, but the weight of the past few months is visible in the new lines on his face. What transpired that day had to force us to face problems we had been putting off for. Change frequently occurs in those years. Marcus responded, not via comfort, but after a confrontation. The two guys stood and shook hands. They were no longer enemies. friendly but collaborators in a change that was transforming not just one airline, but also establishing a new norm for an industry as a whole. Sometimes justice is about advancement rather than punishment,